Oh, yes.
Welcome back once again, everyone. Today we're taking a look at the newly released Transformers Vintage G1 Autobot Blaster. And I gotta tell you, seeing this toy in a box in hand really takes me back. First time I ever encountered a blaster toy was actually at a friend's house. He had it. I was too poor to have it, so I just got to marvel at his. So this is the only new release to the vintage line so far. There hasn't been anything, revealed, announced, leaked, as far as I know. Maybe the last vintage reissue they do with Walmart. I don't know. I mean, it's really slowed down, and maybe it's just not working out for them. I mean, most of these toys end up going on pretty deep clearance anyway, which is a shame. I would have liked to have seen more reissues, especially ones that haven't been done a bunch of times. Unfortunately, Blaster, he's like one of the most reissued G1 toys here in the States. So, a lot of people weren't very impressed by this. Me, I never got it when it was reissued or, originally, so I'm fine. I'm happy to have them. But I get how this is kind of repetitive to some people. So, anyway, if you've seen my reviews, you know how this goes. We're going to take a look at Blaster's packaging. We're going to open it up, we'll see his instructions, and we'll see Blaster himself in both his tape deck and robot modes. I'll be doing some group shots and comparisons today, and then at the end of the video, I'll give my final thoughts. So Blaster comes in a near perfect recreation of his original packaging. You got the little flap up top, the rounded edges, which is a nice touch. I'm glad they fixed that from the early reissues. You got the really just awesome 80s artwork of Blaster here on the front. Got a big old window where you can see him. Got his name, all that. Converts from radio to robot and back. You got his conversion steps up top. Turn to the side, some pictures of him and his two modes. And here on the back, I always love these, the battle dioramas they have. And this is second year, I believe, the 1985 assortment. So you got some of your like season 2 characters, the Dinobots, the Secticons, Jetfire. Looks like Road Rage there, which never got a G1 Road Rage in the original line, but okay. Shockwave, so pretty cool. And then down here on the bottom, you have his tech specs. And you can see Autobot Blaster. You got the lines showing off his different strengths. And you got it in 2 languages. I'm not sure. Is that Spanish? I don't think that's Spanish. Maybe it is. No, I don't think it is. Okay, anyway.
Let me see.
Yeah, it's probably French for Canada. All right. So his function, communications. When the music is rocking, I'm rolling, is his quote. And his bio is, finds all Earth music interesting, but it's rock and roll, good, hard, and loud that really sparks his circuits, which makes sense with his personality.
Sure, nice.
In the forefront of any situation he's involved in. As AM/FM stereo cassette player, he can perform as deck plus receive radio signals of all frequencies with power outputs as low as 1/1,000,000th of a watt. Interesting. Acts as Autobot Communications Center, can transmit up to 4,000 miles. Honestly, it's not that far by today's standards, but okay. Carries electro scrambler gun that disrupts electrical devices. So, he's their communications guy / communications saboteur. So very cool, very fitting. You can tell that his personality in the cartoon did not stray very far from, what we see in his tech specs. The comic version of him was a bit different, more tragic character. And then this side is just the same as the other one. So, all very cool. And now it is time to open up the box. All right, now we have Blaster's very colorful instruction book. So you got this nice full color print of the character right here on the front. And just go ahead and unfold it. And it shows you how to transform him from his tape deck to robot mode. Continues around here on the back. Shows you how to place his weapon, and then just the finished product. I really do miss the days when Transformers were packaged in their alternate modes. It made a lot more sense to me. But there's that. And now here's Blaster in his tape deck mode. And, it makes for a pretty convincing tape deck. He came from the Microman toy line, so the idea was for them to turn into realistic, household objects. And he does pretty well at that. You can see he's got some nice little sticker details here. Luckily, these are already pre-applied. So you get some foil stickers here, Autobot symbol, He's got a rub sign where you gotta touch his no-no parts. Interesting placement by Hasbro there, but yeah. Go ahead and rub it, and it should reveal an Autobot symbol. Not very bright, but it's there. And pretty clean on the back, except for the fairly obvious robot head that's just looking down there. And quite sturdy. You can hold it by the handle. It just works, nice and compact. Now, unfortunately, there's nowhere to store his weapon. Much like many of the Generation 1 Transformers, they didn't really have integrated part or weapon storage in their alt modes. They were just kind of left to the side, which is a shame. And one thing that's pretty cool about this guy is that he does retain some of the functionality of the original Microman toy. So he's got a play button. When you press it down, it actually stays down. And I believe the original toy actually had like a radio or something in it, which was obviously nixed for the Transformers release. So you got that. Then you got these two just say off, press those, pops the play button back up. And now, of course, the most famous button, the eject button, which opens up his little cassette deck there. All right, now none of Blaster's more well-known cassette partners have been announced or released for the vintage line, which is unfortunate. However, I do have some odds and ends in the form of the Decibel and Leg Out teams of his Dino cassettes. So we got those guys here. And you can just see they all, despite being kind of oddly shaped, fit the standard cassette silhouette. See what we did there. So these guys, they work pretty well. You just go ahead and slide them in. It's kind of a tight fit. Some friction there, so don't force it. And you just close it up. And then he looks really cool, sporting his little cassettes. You just press the eject button again to open it. And usually your results vary depending on the cassette, since they're not all exactly the same dimensions. Okay, he goes in pretty well. Ooh, this one's a tight fit. Okay. Ooh. Alright, you can probably force that in there. I'm not going to do that. I don't want to break anything. Oh boy. Oh, Craffy, he goes in there. A little bit of force. Okay, so I'm going to try putting this one in there. It's a little too big. And that tends to happen. When they try to engineer very different figures into the same basic shape, they don't always get it 100% right. All right, now I want to show off a comparison between Blaster and his Shattered Glass counterpart, who is actually a recolor of Twin Cast, which was a Japanese exclusive upgrade for Blaster. And mold-wise, the difference between them is this newly retooled tape compartment. It's got a bigger door, and it's designed for you to be able to fit 2 tapes in there. And also, it just generally fits the tapes better from a width perspective. So we got our little fella that wouldn't fit inside Blaster. Goes in this guy quite a bit more easily. Still some friction there, but you don't have to force it too much. So really shows the improvement that they made in the mold. Almost makes me wish they had used the retooled version for the Blaster reissue, but I know a lot of people would have a problem with that because it would be less authentic. So I don't know, maybe perhaps if they'd done some slight modification just to make the sides, like the plastic on the sides, a little bit thinner. Because, it would just take shaving off, just millimeters worth of plastic on each side. But I think it could be done. It would have made them a little more compatible with all of his various tapes. So, I don't know, a little disappointing, but again, that's not the fault of this release per se. It's, the fault of the original Blaster design, because that toy wouldn't have fit these guys either. For another comparison, here we have the Titans Return Blaster, which is the most recent update of the character, and one of the best efforts at recreating the original design. Now, there are some pretty key differences here in the alt mode. The new Blaster is set up as more of a loud boom box than just like your typical cassette player that you would carry around. Yeah, you can see the overly large speakers here. And because of the desire to make a more streamlined and dynamic looking robot mode. The alt mode is not quite as convincing, especially here in the middle where you have this kind of odd, compact little tape door and you don't really have buttons. You just have like skirt flaps that have down arrows on them. So, you know, it's not as convincing. The one advantage it does have is you can actually store his weapon on the back, which some of the original can't do. So overall, just an interesting little look at how the design evolved over the years. In fact, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think maybe this blaster is supposed to be some sort of a, one of those like iPod dock kind of things, because his tapes, whether it's the one he comes with or his actual tape characters, they're not cassettes anymore for Titan's Return. They were supposed to be some sort of little like tablet or music player kind of thing. So this may just be one of those docks you plug it into to, you know, get bigger speakers, which kind of makes sense, honestly. All right, now it's time to do the transformation, and it's a fairly simple one. So you want to start off by pulling these apart, separating the halves of the handle, like so, and pull the legs out, straighten them. You're going to slide this middle part down so that push the handle into the legs. Swing the legs down. Flip out his feet, like so. And pull the arms apart, rotate them, extend them. Don't mind my cat in the background. Go ahead, use these sliders, bring the fist down and turn them. Push the arms back in, at least a bit. I would leave some space for aesthetics. And then, well, she really wants in. And then just go ahead, flip the head up and around. All right, so we got Blaster all set up. Now, of course, what's a warrior without his weapon, right? So go ahead, plug it into here. Go ahead, pose him however you want to. And there we go. And you can see, based on my camera angle, he's a very, very tall boy. In fact, he pretty much towers over his nemesis, old Soundwave here. See, there's a great disparity in these original toys. And I don't know, they're quite the contrast. Soundwave is much shorter, but he's a lot more dense, got more moving parts and everything, and he has die cast. In fact, the vintage Soundwave retailed for $20 more than this Blaster. Blaster was only $30, Soundwave was a whole $50. Of course, he did come with Buzzsaw, so there's that to consider. So yeah, they're quite different. Honestly, Blaster comes off looking like the cheaper looking toy, you know, something not quite as high quality when it comes to the parts. And of course, that's not anything new, you know, for this reissue. That's just kind of how it's always been. Soundwave has been the superior toy. Get it? Soundwave superior. Oh, I cracked myself up. But anyway, it is cool that we did get both of these guys before the vintage line inevitably at this point seems to just fade into obscurity. Very disappointing. Really wanted to see more, but I think Blaster might be it. Here he is again with his shattered glass incarnation, and you can see how much the paint scheme really alters the perception of this toy's whole physique and just the way everything plays out with your eyes. There's also some subtle differences too, such as the very big disparity in size between their Autobot symbols, as well as different shoulder stickers here. So, you know, it's a good way to reuse a mold and create something kind of unique and interesting. The Shattered Glass Blaster, he's personified as, I guess he's got like a German accent or Russian. It's kind of hard to tell from the comics what it's supposed to be exactly. And he's just kind of like a no-nonsense, real like boot camp drill instructor kind of personality. Whereas, you know, our standard Blaster we all know and love is, you know, real relaxed, happy-go-lucky character. At least in the cartoon. Not so much in the comics. He's a bit of a sad panda in the comics. But I do wonder, since, I mean, this toy is only a few years old, the SG-1, so the mold's available for twin cast. I wonder if for vintage they wouldn't do some kind of maybe a special release, a Pulse exclusive of the Sound Blaster and Twin Cast versions of this. I'd buy it. It'd be the first time they were widely available here in the US, so it'd be easy money. Might even do it in a 2-pack since we don't really have a precedent for English packaging here when it comes to those two guys. Here's our Titan's Return Blaster again in his robot mode, just so you can see how far that design has evolved over, 3 decades. And I think Titan's Return Blaster is a very underrated toy. You don't see it get a ton of praise, but as far as updates go, this guy's near perfect. I mean, he gets all of the details down, right? He gets the arrows, his little knee details, he's got the speakers on his shins, he's got reproduction of these stickers above the feet. He's got the shoulder details, but they're molded now. I mean, this is how you do an update right. Yeah, there's some alterations to his alt mode to make him a little more recognizable to, today's children. But, I mean, when it comes to the robot mode, this is it. And this toy's already, a few years old. This isn't even cutting edge. And I know a lot of people are still hoping for another update to Blaster because this one does not scale well with current toys. He is a leader class. But interestingly, he is pretty much the exact same height as a regular Blaster. You go ahead and straighten his legs out, get him to stand completely upright. You'll see they're very, very close in size. Now, the original one, he gets them by like a few millimeters, but overall, I mean, it's almost perfect. So, yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to gush on my Titan's Return Blaster. Never did get a chance to review him because I didn't start reviewing until well after I got that guy. But yeah, I'll plug him here. If you like Blaster, but you don't like the simplicity of the old toy, try to track one of these down. I don't know how much they go for now, but very dynamic looking. Looks great on a shelf. All right, here's another look at Blaster with his currently available cassettes. And in case you're wondering, from left to right, you have Dial, Zor, Noise, and Graphy. At least those are the Americanized names. The reissues use some weird Japanese romanization. Now, these two are officially part of the vintage line. They were exclusives. These guys you actually had to get by buying 2 separate Bumblebee movie themed multi-packs. And each one of these guys came with like an evil Decepticon counterpart to their partner. So like Dial came with an evil version of Zor and vice versa. So you had to buy both packs to get the 2 good guys, which is kind of annoying, but it is what it is. So yeah, it is really cool that he does have a little mini army if you've kept up with all these exclusives, which admittedly may not be worth it. These aren't the strongest cassette molds out there, and the amount it'll cost you to get all these is fairly substantial. But if you have them already or you're willing to track them down, they go pretty well with Blaster. And until he gets his classic cassettes re-released, this is all you got to play with. So up to you if you want to go through the trouble, I suppose. And for one last bit of fun, I've gone and combined his cassettes into their, combiner modes. You have leg out and decibel. And one thing to be aware of, if you haven't seen already, the reissue of leg out, as well as his evil counterpart, has a assembly error with the feet, which makes him very unstable, and he wants to flop forward because his feet don't really reach all the way to the ground. I think they're on backwards, and there's not really a way to fix it without doing some serious disassembly, and I just don't want to do that to my toy. So just be aware of that. If you have leg out, you need to pose them carefully. But yeah, this is it's pretty neat. Using the combined modes, it does put these guys a little more in scale with Blaster compared to how his cassette partners scaled with him in the cartoon. And overall, just looks kind of cool to have him with more humanoid partners hanging about. Of course, how you display him is totally up to you. Maybe you prefer the dinosaur modes. Personally, I'm reluctant to display leg out in this mode because of his tendency to fall over, and all I need is for somebody to like stomp the floor hard enough and he'll just flop right off my shelf. So I'll probably keep him in dinosaur mode on my G1 shelf. Okay, anyway, staying on topic. So this was our look at the vintage G1 reissue of the Autobot Blaster from 1985. So what do I think of this toy? Well, I mean, if you're into Transformers, you've probably at least seen this toy before in pictures or something. You might have even handled one. You might own one, depending on how long you've been in the hobby. So you kind of know what you're getting here. He is a solid design as far as proportions and everything. A little more posable than some of the early Transformers. Very tall, much bigger than most of his wave mates. In fact, I don't know, he might be taller than like all of the 85 Transformers, now that I think about it. But yeah, he's got a solid presentation in both modes. He has the great little play feature of utilizing cassettes, if you can find cassettes for him. Soundwave's cassettes will work with him for the most part, and those may still be hanging around on shelves at your Walmarts, depending on where you live. And I don't know, he does a lot for being a relatively simple toy, and that actually makes him very good for young children. If you have a little one and you're trying to find them, a toy that they can transform, it's not too hard, but it feels more authentic than like a one-step changer. This guy's kind of perfect for that. In fact, my little guy is begging me to get him one, and I probably will. At $30, it's not, out of the question for a toy for a young kid, and it'll just give your kids that feel of getting a real Transformer. So I would pick him up, whether you're an adult, whether you got kids. He's great. He's $20 cheaper than Soundwave was. Given the vintage line's propensity for going on deep clearance, you may even find him much cheaper than that. Heck, you might get like a $10 blaster. I mean, Astro Train went from like $50 to $40 to $9 in some places when they were clearancing them out. So up to you if you want to grab him now or wait. But either way, pick this guy up if you don't have a version of him already. Very solid Generation 1 Transformer. Though, of course, that's only how I feel. Now I want to know what you all think of Blaster. Do you think he's a good Generation 1 figure? Do you think $30 is a fair asking price for the toy? Do you own the original one still? He seems to be one of the more sturdy molds, so if you took good care of him, he's probably still fully functional after all these years. Any and all feedback, as always, is welcome in the comments section. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to toss it a like. Let YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. I thank you for taking this trip down memory lane with me and checking out the vintage reissue of G1 Blaster. And with all that said, I will see you next time.